Welcome back to the podcast. My special guest today is Associated Press reporter Marcia Dunn. Marcia shares her experience from covering the space program and related technology, along with insights on the current Artemis 2 mission and advice for upcoming space reporters and writers. So Marcia, we find ourselves at the Johnson Space Center covering this historic Artemis 2 mission. Before we go into some of the highlights and some of your thoughts on it, set the background. How did you get involved with covering NASA, space in general for the Associated Press?
Well, I'm a Pittsburgh native, and the original AP aerospace writer, Howard Benedict, was getting ready to retire to go work for Alan Shepard, first American flight at his new Mercury 7 Scholarship Foundation. And the AP was desperate all of a sudden, like, oh my God, he's really leaving. And so in 1990, on Groundhog Day, I'm covering Punxsutawney Phil in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, and I get the call and they say, we're just going to ask you flat out, would you be interested in covering space for us down in Cape Canaveral? And I'm like, sure. But I have to tell you, I'd interviewed Tom Wolfe, Right Stuff author, about other stuff, and I'd even gotten to interview a cosmonaut and an astronaut who were making a guest appearance in Morris, Pennsylvania back in the late 80s. And so I really only knew bare bones about space, right? So in February of 1990, I moved from Pittsburgh down to Cape Canaveral and have been there ever since. So quite 36 years now covering the space program. And the first 5 years was pretty hairy because I had to learn on the job. And but I never thought I'd be here this long, but I'm glad I am. And it was worth waiting to be able to cover the first moonshot with people since Apollo.
Mm-hmm. You talk about that learning curve compared to maybe other subjects that you'd covered. What was the hardest part of it? Was it all the technical jargon, the acronyms that NASA's synonymous for, or what?
Oh, the acronyms by far. You know, when I inherited this job, I was given a book with acronyms. They had a whole published book just with acronyms, and so I wouldn't embarrass myself at NASA news conferences at Kennedy Space Center. I would wait until it ended, then I'd hustle up to the panelists afterward and ask my questions, right? And frequently at the beginning, I'd say, well, what does some particular acronym stand for? And they wouldn't know. The engineers knew what it meant, but they couldn't tell me what it stood for. So the language was particularly difficult. And look, I'm not a mathematical engineering type person. I gravitate toward words, right? Literature. And so it was something else. But I like to think after about 5 years, I nailed it. And I think I still don't know nearly as much as I could, but I know enough to take this technical stuff and break it down into a way that everyday people can understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember your first mission, and what was significant about that for you?
Yes, Atlantis. Atlantis was my first shuttle mission in February 1990, and I had about a 2-week overlap with my predecessor, the former AP correspondent Howard Benedict, and it was what I remember most about it was in the middle of the night. It was middle of the night, multiple delays. It was so often delayed that they scrubbed one night because the commander had a cold, right? Yeah, and he just didn't feel good enough to go, and so like it finally went at some ungodly time in the middle of the night. And it was Howard's last night, so we were able to watch it together. And in any event, yes, and I take pride in that. Atlantis was my first astronaut spacecraft to see fly, and that's what now is parked at the Kennedy Space Center as a museum relic. But it's good to go over and see it every once in a while, and I have fond memories of Atlantis. Last shuttle to fly.
So about 13 years after you started, we had the tragedy of Columbia in 2003. You'd been covering the space program for 13 years. In the limited time I've been covering it, I've realized how quickly you start to connect with these folks. It's not just this person that you hear about that's on TV or on the radio, this astronaut. It's a real person, and you get to know about their family and all the rest of it. I'm sure in 13 years you had developed those connections and stuff as well. When that happened, how did that affect you as a journalist? Did it affect how you told those stories of the space program after that?
It did, and interestingly, that featured Israel's first astronaut, whom I got to know especially well because he was a focus of a lot of human interest stories, right? And the night before the launch, I was invited by the Israeli embassy in Washington to attend a pre-launch party, and I got to meet Ilan Ramon's father, his wife, all his children. I believe there were 4 at the time. And so, like, fast forward to landing day, right? And there's silence coming out of the sky, and finally we learn that the Columbia had melted from the inside out from a foam strike that had occurred at liftoff under the left wing. So, I'll tell you right now, I have my badge here from Kennedy, and hidden inside of all this is my pass from that embassy party that I've never taken out from before, as they called it, 107. It's sort of discolored and everything, but you can still see, you've got the Israeli flag and everything in there, and that means quite a bit to me. And it was very painful, in the aftermath, and it took NASA quite a while to admit that it was a foam strike that brought them down. So hard to cover that kind of stuff when you get to know the people. And even during this Artemis 2 mission, at liftoff, that's the first time people boarded the Space Launch System rocket to fly anywhere, least of all the moon. And wow, we were just, the tension at Kennedy on launch evening was tense. We were all, and not to mention, we didn't think they'd go off that night because there were all these last minute countdown issues, right? But the weather cooperated, the problems got worked out, and off they went. And it was euphoria, I have to tell you, at the launch site after that liftoff. But, coming back is dangerous stuff too. So, everybody's saying prayers and crossing their fingers.
Day in the life of covering space for the AP. I'm sure you've got stuff you're working on every day.
Yes, and it's not just space flight, human space flight. I cover a lot of the astronomical observations, new pictures coming down from the Webb Space Telescope, from Hubble, new asteroid missions, Mars, right? Robotic probes out there doing their thing. And SpaceX alone is launching almost every day out of there. Now, I do not cover all the Starlink launches because I would never get any sleep. But Starship is coming down the pike now. They hope to be launching out of Florida soon, not just Texas. And as the new NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, is lighting a fire under NASA to get going on these future Artemis missions. And so I think it's going to be very, very busy looking forward, on top of what I do all the time anyway.
Mm-hmm. How do you keep it all in check? How do you plan those stories out, meet deadlines? Because I would assume an association like the Associated Press, I mean, you're always generating information because of the wire service. People are picking up your stories. I saw a story in the Galveston Daily News, which really? Covers where I live down here.
Yeah, well, it's hard to keep juggling things. Thank God for the alarm setting on my phone, because I can barely keep track some days of, oh my gosh, there's an news conference. NASA's holding a news conference in half an hour on I don't know, some Mars report, right? So it is. It's hard to juggle all this, and you got to triage sometimes. I'm one person. I can't do everything. So I have always said, covering this beat, that I pick and choose in large part what to write about. If I find it interesting, someone who came at this cold, and if I could chat it up with my friends or family and they find it interesting, then that's a story, right? And I try to keep a broad perspective. I'm writing for everybody, not just a technical crowd. So I like for the human interest. I like for the people stories. Like, on Artemis 2, it was such a heart-tugging moment when Reed Wiseman and his crew proposed naming 2 lunar craters after Reed's late wife. And all the parallels between Apollo 8 and Apollo 13 and Artemis 2, it's really cool. And I like to weave in not just the technical stuff, but all the human stuff going on behind the scenes too.
How does writing on space help you tell that human interest story that you've mentioned a couple of times, maybe in ways that subjects you've written on before you started covering space doesn't?
Well, the reason why I got that call to cover space in Pittsburgh, in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, on Groundhog Day, is because I'd already been doing a lot of medical writing for the AP. Pittsburgh at the time, in the 1980s, was a leader in liver transplantation. Okay. Groundbreaking transplant surgery going on at the time. And my bosses thought that I could take this super technical subject, medicine, surgery, disease, and since I could seem to put that in a way that was easy to read or easily understandable for the public, they were hoping I could do the same thing with space. So I've always found science interesting, medicine, all this sort of stuff, and look, the underlying question to all of this, even for PhD scientists as well as someone like me or you or the average person, is like, what's out there, right? Are we alone? I mean, these are the grand questions of humanity. And even to be a tiny part of helping to answer that question is just so wow to me. When I tell people, I don't know, I cover space for the Associated Press, it stops people in their tracks, right? People are curious, they're interested, it's who doesn't love space, it's a great subject.
Well, you mentioned two things there, space and the Associated Press. So space, most people would understand, but in the media world, the AP is the oldest news outlet in the world. How does that affect you as a journalist? To me, that's kind of like the cream of the crop.
I just read a statistic this week, actually. I was digging around that 4 billion people in the world read or see AP content every day. That's a lot of people, right? It's hard to imagine. And so, the AP has always, from the beginning of the space age, Sputnik, right, has made space a priority in its coverage. And I'm only the third person to cover space for the AP full-time. I mentioned Howard Benedict, my predecessor, but before that, for a brief period, there was a man named Jack King who went on to become the voice of Apollo. He left the AP, went to work for NASA, and this is the guy whose voice you hear, counting down, engine sequence start, 3, 2, 1, and we have liftoff. It's like, his voice if you hear it, right?
Right.
So Jack King, right? Howard Benedict, Marcia Dunn. I'm in pretty good company. Now, both Jack and Howard are no longer with us. They're both gone. But I feel their presence all the time, and it's just what a legacy, right? Mm-hmm. And, it's funny because people know me by my voice, too, because, I don't come to Johnson Space Center to cover many missions these days. Artemis 2 is a huge exception, right? Who could, you got to be where the action's at when you're flying to the moon. So here I am. But normally I'm out at Kennedy Space Center or on a phone bridge. NASA does so many dial-in telecons these days for news conferences. So here I get to Johnson, and as soon as I say something, I know you. And in fact, in a restaurant in Orlando a couple years ago, which is just 50 miles from the Cape, I'm walking through the restaurant, and this woman says, I know you. How do I know you? And I said, do you watch NASA TV? And she goes, all the time. I said, she couldn't believe it. So it's funny,
You're a celebrity, Marcia.
Well, not really. And I'm glad it's no more than that. But voice recognition, if you will.
Storytelling. I'm sure there'll probably be some people that may listen or watch this wherever they may find it, and maybe they're interested in, maybe they're a journalist now or a writer, someone wants to write the next space novel. Tips for writing space.
Wow. Tips for writing space. Well, forget jargon. Do not use EVA for spacewalk, extravehicular activity, right? Or maybe put in a few if you really want to get people in the mood. But, I love good science fiction, frankly. I always have. And one of my favorites is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. I know that goes way back, but it's so gripping, especially now when we're thinking of beyond the moon, what's the next step but Mars. But and all the movies that have come out recently, Project Hail Mary, which I haven't had a chance to see yet. But I would just say the more believable you make it, I think, it's funny, like science fiction now. Today's reality of space was science fiction to many people just a generation ago, right? And it's been 2 generations almost since Apollo. And the Apollo crowd tells me that they thought by now, my God, we'd be living on Mars, swooping all over and all this kind of stuff, and we're not. But to write about space is, I say, focus on the human element, right? People. And the everlasting, ever perennial striving, exploring beyond the home planet. I mean, it's just, and hey, parallel universes, multiverse, go for it, right? I mean, anything is possible today when you think about it. Nothing is too crazy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, here we are, 2026. We just sent 4 astronauts back to the moon after more than 50 years. How incredible is that? And so, I sort of sound like the old Apollo guys now, but like, who knows what the future will bring in the next few decades. Fingers crossed.
Have you had any opportunity to interview people from that generation that involved in the space program compared to where we're at now with Artemis 2?
Oh, yeah, sure. Right. Even before this mission, I talked to several. And I happened to talk to, there was one female face in launch control for Apollo 11, Joanne Morgan, because back then, she was an engineer, but most of the women were, secretaries and in secondary roles to the all-important launch control team. And she's still mad that that the Nixon administration and NASA canceled the last 3 Apollo flights. But after that, she's thrilled that the Artemis launch director is a woman, right? We have a woman, Christina Cook, who's part of Artemis 2. And so that's a big change from before. But, the one thing that all the Apollo guys and one woman told me is that it's about time. They were afraid. And there aren't many left. They're all in their 80s and 90s. But the ones who are still with us told me, each and every one of them, is that they were worried they'd die before we'd get back to the moon. So yay that they got to see that.
Speaking of seeing it, you talked about being at Kennedy the other day and the anticipation and excitement, and I guess maybe a bit of trepidation with the launch. So we've launched, we've been up for some time now. They're going to be coming back home here in just a couple of days. What have been some of the highlights for you so far on the mission? Wow,
translunar injection, right? I mean, blasting out of orbit around Earth and heading to the moon. That was like the huge green light that came. Everything was working fine with the Orion capsule, the life support, everything seemed to be okay except for the toilet. But not to worry, they have backup plans. And then obviously the lunar fly around, that was why they went, They didn't go into orbit, right? Like Apollo 8. No landing. I can't tell you how many times even some of my colleagues, but so many people in the public, oh yeah, they're landing, aren't they? No, we're not landing on the moon. I mean, when you say flying to the moon, people just presume they're landing without fail. But that lunar fly around with the we didn't see too many pictures coming back real time, but the next morning, wow, total solar eclipse from their perspective. Earth set, which was just as breathtaking as Earthrise, taken during Apollo 8. Seeing those pictures and knowing they were up there. Too bad Houston's been so cloudy, because I haven't had a good chance to look up and see the moon. But I'll make sure that happens for the next Apollo 4 in 2 years, hopefully.
The next couple of days, what are you looking forward to the most? Are there any milestones that you personally are looking forward to?
Well, we get to actually have a crew news conference, right? We get to ask the astronauts as they're headed home some questions. That's always fun, right? I've never asked a question of anyone so far away ever in my life, so that'll be really wild.
New distance record for you,
New distance
Marcia.
record for the AP. That's well, maybe not. Our Apollo guys may have had a little beat on me, but in my career, and obviously entry and splashdown. Those are going to be just like launch. Those are sweaty, worried events.
I would imagine this is going to give you a lot of source material for weeks and months to come. Even after Splashdown Friday, it's not like it stops, because we'll do a debrief in a couple week or two, and then leading up to the next one. Are you already looking forward to Artemis 3, or are you still just transfixed on what's happening?
I'm just transfixed on Artemis 2 right now. In fact, even before launch, some of my video colleagues were saying, have you put in for post-splash interviews with the crew yet? And I said, I cannot. I said, I can only concentrate on launch at this point. So now that the mission is underway and everything, I've got the interviews set up for the crew. Fingers crossed that comes through. But I think I'm going to take a little pause, and then I'll be right back at it with Artemis 3, which is going to stick around Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, in 2027. A sort of shoehorned in extra mission that'll sort of mimic what Apollo did, practice docking the Orion capsule with lunar landers in orbit around Earth, so that you don't get any surprises if you try it around the moon. But let's all face it, everybody is going to be waiting with bated breath for the moon landing, Artemis 4. That's the biggie.
Mm-hmm. Last couple of questions I have for you, Marcia. One, I can tell you're excited talking about the space program. What is it that keeps you interested in it all these years later?
What keeps me interested? Everything, right? And not just the human space flight, but the astronomy side of it. Looking up at the night sky and looking at all the different planets and writing about what we're learning about all these faraway places, and not just our own solar system, but planets beyond, exoplanets. It's just all so intriguing. And, one of my colleagues, early colleagues a few decades ago, likened, the astronauts come out on launch day and they burst out of the operations and checkout building, the doors open, and they are escorted to their Astro van, or in the case of SpaceX, they're waiting Teslas. And a colleague of mine once likened that to chariots. They once likened it to gladiators going into the Colosseum. Dangerous business. You're sitting on explosive fuel atop a rocket, and I think who couldn't want to be part of writing that history, right? This is, the 21st century. This is the future. This is the present. And witnessing all this firsthand is just so meaningful to me, I have to say. It's just, I couldn't have hoped for a better career.
Whoever the next AP space reporter may be, whenever that time comes and you say, you know what, I've had enough, it's time to go to the farm or the ranch or whatever your plans may be, Marcia, I don't know. And they come to you and say, I've never covered space, Marcia. Kind of like you when you first started.
That was me.
What's your advice for that? Whether it's the next AP space reporter or anyone who may want to cover whatever the next generation of space travel and space missions may be.
Wow, yeah. Well, I would say to him or her, I would just say, first of all, calm down, right? That's not you on the rocket, and I know it's stressful and everything, but, just write like you're talking to a friend, right? Assume people aren't familiar with all this stuff, but also tell the story in a colorful, compelling way. It just doesn't have to read like, a technical report. It's look for the emotions behind what's happening. That's what I would say. And it's such a compelling story. It's hard not to tell it in such a way.
Very good. Well, thank you, Marcia, for sharing your insights and thoughts on that.
Oh, you're
mission and your
welcome,
career
Richard.
in
It's
space.
been a pleasure. It's just, here we are, just steps from mission control at Johnson Space Center. I mean, what a privilege, right?
If you enjoyed this video, consider supporting our effort to share the news in print and on our extensive website, and now on our new YouTube channel. Contact publisher David Day at area code 409-943-4265 to support the Post newspaper today.